Oh, hell.
Somalis are not terrorizing this nation. We are helping it thrive. Somalis have always seen themselves as a fabric of this nation. So not only are we not going anywhere, we are not going to allow anybody to make us feel less Minnesotan or less American.
Want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
Hey.
Why this beat so crazy?
We will make America proud again. And you try to kill our We will make America wealthy again. And yes, together, we will make America great again.
Oh boy, you just can't make this up. Just gets worse and worse and worse for these people, man. Especially these Democrats. And this lady here. And down there in Minnesota, we've already exposed it in broad daylight. It's already come out. Everybody already knows. The taxpayers are hotter than fish grease. You know. There's millions of people are just saying, why hasn't they revoked her citizenship? Why haven't this heifer and many others been deported, sent back? You know, we've already covered a lot of corruption. The biggest scandal, the feeding, they were supposed to be feeding kids and this and that. You know, it always comes out, man. You know? And now there's so much fraud with this and that. It's just fraud everywhere. And they ought to walk that governor out down there. Tim Walz ought to be walked out. So many people ought to be walked out, investigated, made an example out of. We've already got individuals that are found guilty. I tell you, Democrats, guilty. And old Ilhan Omar is breaking the internet right now. She's in all the headlines. You know, so let's jump into this, man. We got a big one on the show today. It just gets worse and worse and worse. You just can't make this up, man.
In this country, we do not blame the lawlessness of an individual on a whole community. What we also know is that there is not a single evidence that the president or his coolies have put forth that there are any single resource from taxpayers in Minnesota that has gone to aid and abet terrorism. That language is dangerous. That language puts the lives of Somalis not only in Minnesota, but across the country in danger. And if the president believed that and he had evidence, he would take people to court. So we are sick and tired of the president waking up one day and deciding to put forth falsehoods and demonize whole communities, while the ignorant people that support him then take the lies that he's spreading and use it as a fact. We've seen it during the campaign where he said Asians were eating cats and dogs.
Here you go again. Y'all know we did some deep diving on that, and it was crazy what we found out of that, you know, but they don't want to report the truth to you. They don't want to tell you the truth. Let's just gaslight, fearmonger, misinformation, disinformation. Let's just lie. And remember, he's the big bad orange man.
We've seen his vice president repeat those lies.
She can't even
We've
get it out.
seen the media run it as a headline as if it was a fact. That is shameful. That is shameful. That is ignorant. It makes us look like a stupid nation that does not believe in truth, but traffics in lies. It makes the world mock us, and we are better than that.
Oh, hell.
We are better than that as Americans.
You just can't make that up, you know. Hey, everybody's exposing it in broad daylight all over the internet. You look at every single post, everybody's posting What's actually going on down there in Minnesota? You know, and it's fraud everywhere. You know, and the taxpayers are hotter than fish grease. You know, and she keeps going viral for this. You know, the immigration fraud, and people are saying, why is this being ignored by the FBI and DOJ? There's DNA evidence that Ilhan Omar married her brother to help him gain citizenship. That's a violation of our immigration laws. Their citizenship should be revoked and both should be deported. Who else wants something done about this? And it gets almost another 1 million hits. Oh boy. You just can't make it up, man. You know, you just can't.
Decided they sent it to a second husband, to this DNA pack up in Minnesota, and arrested him on some different charges. Who knows?
But anyways, I wanted to get into this on today's show. Seen Dr. Steve post something about it, that things just got worse for Ilhan Omar, and see what he came up with. So you just can't make this up, man.
Things have gone from bad to worse for the ultra-repulsive Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. The list of indictments continues to grow in what many are calling the single largest COVID fraud scheme in American history. And Omar is absolutely panicking. And when you hear what she just said, you understand precisely why. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve. You're to stop the unstoppable rise of a new conservative age of the world in ways you never even imagined. Make sure to brand new Turley Talks to bundle the dope for your loved ones at the best prices of the year. Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is appearing to be cracking under the growing pressure of a massive scandal that has absolutely rocked the Minneapolis Somali community that put her in power. Now, over the weekend when I was in Vegas, I told you about how over 70 people have now been arrested in what prosecutors are calling the largest pandemic fraud case in U.S. history. We're talking about $250 million that was supposed to feed hungry children during COVID, instead lining the pockets of fraudsters. The scheme was run through an organization called Feeding Our Future, and at the center of it was a Minneapolis restaurant named Safari that's being accused of acting as a front for this massive money laundering operation. So,
and
Safari
you know,
restaurant...
We covered that on the show so many times. We've exposed that in broad daylight.
Claimed to be serving 5,000 meals a day, 7 days a week to underprivileged children, when in reality... apparently, they were spending just about $2,000 on actual food. Altogether, over $250 million was stolen from federal child nutrition programs. But it gets worse. We're now learning from federal counterterrorism sources that at least part of those stolen Minnesota welfare funds have been flowing directly to an organization known as Al-Shabaab. That's an Al-Qaeda-linked terror group in Somalia. So this is all part of remittance payments that were made by this alleged fraud ring back to Somalia. So Somalia's economy relies very heavily on remittances, much of it coming from the United States. But so do terrorist organizations like Al-Shabaab. They basically scrape off a percentage of the remittances coming into territories that they control for themselves. And so federal investigators and counterterrorist experts have confirmed Minnesota taxpayer dollars funneled through community remittance networks have indeed ended up enriching groups like Al-Shabaab, this Al-Qaeda spinoff.
Boy.
One commentator put it this way, it's rather stark. The single largest funder of Al-Shabaab in the world is the Minnesota taxpayer. Well, again, things just...
And that's why we showed y'all in the recent video we just did on the show of taxpayers saying that this person ought to be investigated. Tim Walz ought to resign. People were calling on Tim Walz. You've seen some people posting videos on TikTok. Tim Walz resigned. Tim Walz is a failure, you know. And hey.
Got worse, if you could believe it. Just days ago, a fellow by the name of Usman Kamara became the 77th defendant charged in this Feeding Our Future scheme. He owned a small grocery store in Minneapolis, and he claimed to serve 1,000 meals to children daily, 7 days a week. But in reality, just like Safari Restaurant, He had actually served very few, if any, and he ended up buying himself a building. He wired over $100,000 overseas. He paid $87,000 in kickbacks. And here's the kicker. Kamara had already been kicked out of the SNAP program back in 2015 for suspected fraud.
Just can't make it up, man.
Now let that hit you. This is a guy who got kicked out of SNAP years ago for suspected fraud, and yet Minnesota officials still approved him for this child nutrition program.
Yep. They always find their way back. They always find their way back.
Same fellow for COVID child nutrition program. I mean, where is the real fraud here, if you think about it? It seems to me Minneapolis officials are every bit as much complicit in all of this as anybody from this ring. So, yeah, another defendant was charged, another Somali, who's the 78th person indicted in this fraud ring.
Not 77, 78. You know, the number keeps climbing.
That seems to know no ends. This guy claimed he was serving 6,000 meals a day at a site in Pelican Rapids, Minnesota. Well, just again, who's the real culprit here? It turns out that's double the entire population of the entire town. Children and adults combined. $1 million, bought real estate and traveled on taxpayer funds. Surprise, surprise. In Minneapolis. 4 Minnesota GOP congressmen. So we're talking Tom Emmer, Michelle Fischbach, Brad Finstad, and Pete Stauber. They have all demanded the DOJ launch a full federal investigation into whether Minnesota taxpayers were indeed funding terrorism. President Trump, for his part, he's not waiting. He's officially revoked TPS, temporary protection status, for nearly 1,000 Somalis in Minneapolis, and they're all getting sent back effective immediately. Trump's termination of Somali TPS really did draw a line in the sand here as far as Trump is concerned. Fraudsters and those who support terror obviously have to be prosecuted. And if they are not U.S. citizens, then they're out of here. They got to be deported immediately. And so the obvious question in all of this is, what is Ilhan Omar's response to apologizing? Is she also calling for the deportation of those caught up, non-citizens caught up in this $250 million tax-funded fraud?
We just showed y'all her response in the beginning of the show.
What? Following, watch out.
We just showed you.
Terrorizing this nation. We are helping it thrive. Somalis have always seen as a fabric, has seen themselves.
I can't hear this crap again. The hell with that heifer. They ought to walk that heifer out in handcuffs. They should have walked out right there. There ought to be a whole lot of them. They ought to raided the place live on television and walk this heifer out. That's what I ought to think ought to happen.
As a fabric of this nation. So not only are we not...
So true to form, according to Ilhan Omar, Somalis are the real victims in all this. Yep, Somalis are the victim. Not only are Somalis the fabric of America, right? That's what you just said. Somalis are the fabric of America. I bet you didn't know that, by the way. Not only are Somalis the fabric of America, but they are now the victims of a terrorizing, racist, bigoted president. I think it was Chris Rufo on Lauren Ingram's show last night who said that Ilhan Omar appears to be more outraged over those who exposed the scheme than the hundreds of millions of dollars stolen by her own constituents.
Yep.
And Minnesota may have the highest density of fraud in the entire nation, by the way. So this is.
Y'all know I said that like the last 5 videos on the show. You know, like Minnesota is number 1 right now for the wrong reason. Besides other places like California, Chicago, over New York, and all the other places, but when it comes to fraud, Minnesota is top 1. And we know why. Being exposed in broad daylight every single day.
This literally looks like it's just exposed and uncovered than she is about the fraud itself. And there's a reason for that. And that is, for cultural Marxists like Ilhan Omar, what her constituents are doing is simply applying the very plundering principle by which, as far as she's concerned, America originally enriched itself back on America. So I'll say that again because I think it's key. Cultural Marxists like Ilhan Omar believe that America came to power by plundering and exploiting indigenous populations. And so now justice demands that those very populations and all third world peoples now get to plunder us with our tax dollars. They were plundering us the way, supposedly, we used to plunder them. Deeper dive in all of this. It's a phenomenon known as post-Americanism, okay? And post-Americanism, which is basically taking over the Democrat Party, post-Americanism is the belief that America is fundamentally an evil, unfair, exploitive, racist, unjust, sexist society, and therefore deserves to be completely replaced by a post-1964 political and cultural revolution. You literally have Democrats like Elie Mystal, who's a frequent contributor to MSNBC, who openly declare that all laws passed before the 1964 Civil Rights Act are null and void because they were all passed by what was, in effect, an apartheid state. And of course, if you take that logic all the way, that means nullifying the Constitution. Because for these radical leftists, the Constitution is itself inherently racist. In fact, you know, the so-called Black National Anthem, right, that is often sung before NFL games. When they defend that, you'll hear radical leftists, particularly on MSNBC, arguing that the national anthem is itself racist, particularly the third verse, they'll say.
Yeah, we know.
And they have ultimately no loyalty
disgrace,
whatsoever to our nation in any absolute sense. But as you're noticing, they are loyal. They are patriotic towards other countries, particularly their countries of origin. Disappear. They just simply relocate away from our nation to another one. I mean, we saw this recently. Do you remember Illinois Representative Delia Ramirez? She's a bona fide member of the squad, right? This group of ultra-repulsive Marxists like Ilhan Omar and AOC and the like. She made a statement while visiting Mexico City, and speaking in Spanish, she openly declared, "I am a proud Guatemalan before I am a proud American." And everybody in the audience started clapping. This was a United States representative who publicly declared in another country and in another language that her ultimate loyalty, her primary allegiance, is to another nation.
How many times Ilhan Omar did it? And we got thousands of footage.
Ilhan Omar proves is that patriotic loyalty in the context of post-Americanism simply gets displaced and redirected, and inevitably redirects towards ethno-nationalist, racial tribalisms. The party of ethno-nationalism, whether it's in the form of BLM or La Raza, which literally means the race, or Somalian nationalism or Guatemalan nationalism.
The BLM scam. Black lives matter. All lives matter.
The post-American Democrat Party is increasingly becoming the party of ethno-tribalisms. And again, the beauty is President Trump is saying bluntly, no more.
No more.
Our post-Americanism that we're seeing infecting the Democrat Party stops with me. We may continue to see it here or there in, Democrat urban enclaves, but as far as the Trump White House is concerned, post-Americanism is dead. America first is the future for another country to represent. Hey, gang!
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. What y'all think, man? Weigh in with your thoughts. How do you feel about Ilhan Omar? How do you feel about everything that's coming out and has been exposed with what's going on down there in Minnesota? Weigh in with your thoughts, y'all. All we're going to do is expose it in broad daylight every single time. But happy Thanksgiving. God bless all of you and your family. I will catch y'all in the next one. Peace and love, you guys.